10 days before he died, Chuck Norris stood in the Hawaiian sunshine, threw a few playful punches at a sparring partner, and told the camera he was turning 86. He said something that sounded almost like a joke and also like a philosophy. Age doesn't slow him down, he simply levels up. Fans laughed, shared it, moved on with their day. Nobody watching that clip imagined it would become one of the last things he ever posted. On March 18, 2026, he was rushed to a hospital on Kauai. He and his wife, Gina, had spent years falling in love with that island, and their oceanfront property on the North Shore had become something like a second home. By the next morning, he was gone. No dramatic buildup, no long illness the public had been tracking. Just a sudden, quiet end to a life that had been anything but quiet. Here's the strange part. The internet had killed Chuck Norris off more times than anyone could count. A car crash hoax made the rounds in 2023. A COVID death rumor spread across social media years earlier. Every single time, he was alive, usually laughing about it. So when his family finally posted the real statement, there was a beat of disbelief before the grief set in. Is this another one of those? It wasn't. The family kept the announcement short and did not share a cause of death. But one phrase in that statement stood out to almost everyone who read it. They thanked the public not for watching his films, but for loving him. It was a small choice of words, but it said something about how the family wanted him remembered, not as a franchise, but as a person. Tributes rolled in fast. Political figures called him tough and genuine. CBS, the same network he had once taken to court over money, released a warm statement honoring his legacy. It was a kind of unified mourning that rarely happens for someone who spent decades pushing back against the industry that made him famous. Financial outlets moved quickly to answer the obvious question: what was he actually worth? The commonly cited figure, drawn from celebrity wealth trackers and repeated across entertainment coverage, lands around $70 million. On its own, that number doesn't say much. The real story is in how that fortune was assembled piece by piece over 60 years, and how a huge chunk of it almost never existed because of a legal fight most fans never fully understood. His estate reportedly includes the Lone Wolf Ranch outside Navasota, Texas, a property stretching across roughly 1,000 acres in Grimes County. It includes the Kauai vacation home, estimated to be worth around $7 million, the very house where he passed away. It includes Seaforce Bottling Company, a water business that exists only because of an accident nobody saw coming. And it includes decades of film royalties, a fitness infomercial deal that ran for almost 30 years, book royalties, endorsement income, and syndication payments from a television show that aired in more than 100 countries. As of now, no will has been made public. Under Texas community property law, his wife Gina O'Kelly would be entitled to half of the marital estate simply by default, with the rest divided among his children. He had 5 kids from 2 marriages, plus one relationship he kept hidden for nearly 3 decades. More on that shortly. Gina already controls 51% of Seaforce as its CEO, which means the water company stays firmly in her hands no matter how the rest of the estate gets divided among the family. The ranch had been their full-time residence since Chuck largely stepped back from Hollywood around 2012, and his twin children, Dakota and Danny Lee, now in their mid-20s, grew up on that land. One person absent from any inheritance is his first wife, Diane Holchek. She died in December 2025, just 3 months before him, after a long struggle with dementia. Though they had divorced back in 1989, their 2 sons, Mike and Eric, stayed by her side until the end. In the span of a few months, Chuck lost both his mother and his first wife before he himself was gone by spring. It's a detail that rarely makes the headlines, but it says a lot about the quiet weight he was carrying in his final chapter. There's also one more family secret buried in his story, one that stayed hidden from almost everyone outside his closest circle for nearly 30 years. We'll get to it. Long before the ranch, the water company, or a single roundhouse kick ever hit a movie screen, there was a small, anxious boy in Ryan, Oklahoma, who once described himself as painfully withdrawn. Carlos Ray Norris was born on March 10, 1940, and nearly didn't survive childbirth. Doctors classified him as a blue baby, born with dangerously low oxygen levels. His mother, Wilma, was devout and worked constant menial jobs to hold the family together. His father, Ray, was a World War II veteran who came home changed and leaned hard into alcohol, vanishing for long stretches at a time. Chuck later admitted something painful. The house felt calmer when his father wasn't in it, and tense whenever he was. The family bounced from Oklahoma to Kansas to California chasing work that never quite paid the bills. By the time Chuck graduated from North Torrance High School in 1958, he was a slight, unathletic teenager who, by his own account, had never actually finished anything difficult in his life. Nobody who knew him then would have bet on what came next. That same year he enlisted in the Air Force and married his high school sweetheart, Diane Holchek. She was 17, he was 18. The Air Force stationed him in South Korea, and it was there that an overlooked kid from Oklahoma found the one thing that would completely rewrite his future. At Ozen Air Base, he wandered into a Tang Soo Do class almost on a whim and became completely absorbed by it. He trained for hours nearly every night under a Korean instructor, and within about a year he had earned his black belt. He later wrote that it was the first time in his life he had accomplished something genuinely hard entirely on his own effort. That single realization mattered more than the belt itself. It gave him proof that he was capable. And once someone believes that about themselves, they tend to go looking for the next hard thing. After his discharge in 1962, he applied to become a police officer and landed on a waiting list. While he waited, he started teaching karate out of his parents' backyard. Within a few years, that backyard hobby had grown into a chain of more than 30 karate schools across Southern California, with a client list that included Steve McQueen, Priscilla Presley, and Bob Barker. He became a 6-time professional karate champion and captured the sport's Triple Crown in 1969. Then, at a tournament at Madison Square Garden, he crossed paths with Bruce Lee, a meeting that would completely redirect the rest of his life. Lee had noticed Norris at a 1967 tournament in New York and sought him out afterward. The two trained together in Lee's backyard for roughly 2 years, constantly arguing over fighting philosophy in a way that sharpened both of them. Eventually, Lee called in a favor. He was directing a film in Rome and needed someone to play the villain in a climactic fight staged inside the Roman Colosseum. Italian authorities had refused permission to shoot there, so Lee filmed it anyway, working quickly and quietly over just a handful of days. That film, Way of the Dragon, was made on a tiny budget and went on to earn well over 100 times that amount worldwide. Norris became internationally recognized for the very fight in which his character lost, facing off against a man he would later call the greatest martial artist to ever live. After Lee's death in 1973, his widow moved into a home near the Norris family, and Chuck spent many evenings there, telling young Brandon Lee stories about his father. It was actually Steve McQueen, one of his old karate students, who first pushed him toward acting, telling him bluntly that he already had the presence. He just needed to learn the craft. Norris took acting classes, made his film debut for a modest paycheck, and later self-distributed his second movie after no studio would touch it. That film turned an 18-fold profit on its original budget, and after that, Hollywood could no longer ignore him. By the early 1990s, he had appeared in more than 20 films and built a loyal audience, but the role that would cement him as a permanent cultural fixture hadn't happened yet. Walker, Texas Ranger, premiered on CBS in April 1993 and nearly collapsed before it found its footing. The original production company went bankrupt during the first season, and only a handful of episodes existed before funding dried up entirely. The show was on the verge of cancellation when CBS looked at the premiere ratings and realized a sizable chunk of American television sets that Saturday night were tuned to a karate-fighting Texas lawman. New financial partners stepped in, and the show survived. What followed was 9 seasons and over 200 episodes, making it the first American primetime drama filmed entirely within Texas. Norris kept creative control through his own production company, insisted on morally grounded storylines that reflected his personal faith, brought his brother Aaron on as co-producer, and even sang the show's theme song himself. His per-episode deal reportedly included a flat fee plus a share of the profits, and across the full run of the series, his acting income alone is estimated to have approached $76 million. Syndication turned the show into something even bigger. A cable network paid a substantial per-episode fee to rerun it in 1997, and the series eventually aired in more than 100 countries. Court filings years later reportedly placed the show's total franchise revenue north of $690 million. That's where things got complicated. In 2018, Norris filed suit against CBS and its studio partner, alleging tens of millions of dollars in unpaid profit participation. His legal team argued the studio had structured its streaming and distribution deals in a way that avoided triggering his contractual share, and that no streaming revenue had been reported to him in over a decade. The case worked its way through the courts for roughly 5 years before settling in 2023 for an undisclosed amount. Whatever that settlement was, it's now part of the estate his family stands to inherit. Norris built his public image around a specific set of values: faith, family, toughness, loyalty. For the most part, that image reflected who he really was. But there was one chapter he kept private for almost 30 years. In 1962, while stationed in California awaiting his Air Force discharge, he met a woman named Johanna and did not tell her he was married. The brief relationship produced a daughter, Dina, born in 1963. When Johanna eventually learned the truth, she raised Dina on her own and eventually told her, once she was a teenager, that her father already had a wife and children and that she should not attempt to reach out. For 26 years, Dina carried her father's name without ever meeting him. Then, after Chuck and Diane's divorce became public in 1989, Dina wrote him a letter. In his memoir, he described the moment she walked into his living room 2 years later. He recognized her instantly, without needing any proof, because he saw his own face staring back at him. They both broke down in tears. He later wrote a line about the situation that became one of the most repeated things he ever said publicly: that illegitimate parents exist, and he had been one of them. But there is no such thing as an illegitimate child. Dina was folded fully into the family from that point forward. In 2015, he posted a vacation photo from Kauai that included her husband, and their 2 sons, taken on the very island where he would later pass away. Almost nobody noticed the photo at the time, because by then the public image had grown so large it had mostly replaced the actual man. In total, he had 5 children. Mike became a Christian filmmaker. Eric built a respected career as a Hollywood stunt coordinator, and even won a NASCAR championship. The twins, Dakota and Danny Lee, grew up on the Texas ranch, and Dina became proof that the man behind the legend carried more complexity and more heart than any highlight reel ever suggested. In late 2012, Gina underwent a series of MRI scans to evaluate a case of rheumatoid arthritis, each one requiring an injection of a contrast agent that's designed to pass through the body harmlessly within hours. In her case, it reportedly never did. Within hours of the first scan, she described a burning sensation throughout her entire body. Repeated emergency room visits followed, along with worsening symptoms: tremors, kidney trouble, loss of function in one arm, memory issues, and severe muscle deterioration that eventually left her surviving mostly on soft, easily digestible food. Doctors tested her for cancer, ALS, Parkinson's, and multiple sclerosis. Every test came back clear. She did her own research and became convinced the contrast agent had lodged permanently in her body, a theory her medical team initially dismissed. Norris later said he watched her decline to the point where he genuinely feared losing her. He arranged a private flight and a paramedic to get her to a specialist in Nevada for chelation treatment, and testing reportedly confirmed extremely elevated levels of the metal in her system. He slept on a couch beside her hospital bed for months, read to her extensively, and eventually flew her overseas for experimental stem cell treatment. He said plainly, in later interviews, that he stepped away from his acting career to focus entirely on keeping her alive. The medical costs over roughly 5 years reportedly reached about $2 million, most of it paid directly out of pocket. In 2017, the couple filed a lawsuit against a group of pharmaceutical manufacturers. Both testified before a federal advisory panel that same year, and regulators subsequently moved to add new warning language to that category of contrast agents. European regulators went further and pulled several products from the market entirely. The lawsuit itself was dropped without a settlement in 2020, with both sides covering their own legal costs. The estimated $70 million fortune wasn't built on film paychecks alone. His decades-long infomercial partnership for a home fitness machine, alongside co-star Christy Brinkley, ran in dozens of countries and sold millions of units, becoming one of the longest-running celebrity endorsement deals in television history. The ranch itself turned into an unexpected business empire. Workers drilling for water in 2011 struck an ancient underground aquifer, a discovery that eventually led Chuck and Gina to launch their bottled water company in 2015. That company now distributes across the mainland United States, and because Gina holds majority control as CEO, it remains entirely under her direction regardless of how the broader estate is divided. He also founded a youth martial arts foundation in 1990 that eventually reached dozens of schools and well over 100,000 young people. By most accounts, it was a project that meant the most to him personally. Not a movie role, not a fight scene, but a room of teenagers learning that discipline is something you build inside yourself and carry everywhere. The debate over how he should be remembered started almost the moment the news broke. He was a man of deep religious conviction who spoke openly about his faith. He was politically outspoken for decades, wrote a long-running opinion column, and campaigned for candidates on both sides of a shifting political landscape over the years. Some commentary after his death focused more on those political positions than on his life's broader arc, and that framing drew immediate pushback from fans and family alike. What isn't in dispute is the fortune itself, the ranch, the water company, the royalties, the settlement, the island property he loved. It's real, and it's now being divided among the people who shared his life. But the reason his family asked the world to thank them for loving him, rather than simply for watching him, is because the man behind the legend was always far more complicated, far more human, and far more worth knowing than any highlight reel or internet meme ever captured.